So this is our very first podcast.
It is.
Neither of us are huge podcast people, so this is going to be an interesting one.
Right.
Hopefully it's not painful for everybody watching.
Mm-hmm.
But we're just going to chat a little bit about events. That's our expertise.
That's right.
Before we get into it, I want to learn a little bit about your background and GoGather's background. If you could give me the quick elevator speech.
Sure. Yeah, GoGather's been around since 2008, about 15 years now, I believe. I keep track of that by my youngest daughter's age, right? We started right about that time. Interesting time for us to get started in 2008. Some of you might be old enough to remember the bit of a financial crisis that we had in 2008. And we recognized the opportunity to really help companies focus on the why behind their events and not just sort of do things that had been done in the past, but really be able to show value and ROI around their events and actually build a team, hence even the name GoGather. It was really about bringing the right people together for any particular client to make sure that we were executing on those higher level sort of goals and objectives and turning those into actionable items at an event. And so, yeah, GoGather got started with that sort of high value goal and purpose from the get-go. And that's really carried through even as we've grown and the economy has gotten better. Those values have really served us very well as our clients. I think some of our greatest success, we always say your success or our client's success is our success. And we've been thrilled to see several clients, both either the individuals as well as the business, really succeed sort of very directly related to the work that they've done around their meetings and events.
That's awesome. Yeah. And, like you said, 15 years, we're coming up on that anniversary pretty soon, huh? That's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And, your experience in the industry has stretched even beyond that. Do you want to give us a little bit of background there?
Yeah. Funny way into the business for sure. I think like most people took sort of the windy road to get where we're going, but always loved sort of being in front of people or certainly getting people together. I was a DJ in college. That's the way I paid my way through college was being a DJ. And so I think from there, just sort of understood, of course, those were parties, right? That was getting people together. Everybody was having a good time. But I started to learn about the power of those personal connections. And it's something that stuck with me. Not really understanding sort of the world of meetings and events. I took a path toward the production side, which still, again, had a lot to do with getting people together. But I was kind of a nerd, like audio, like video, that sort of stuff. So really went that way with it first. And then that's what sort of introduced me into this idea that, creating compelling content or really inspiring people at first through sort of that audio visual experience was very powerful. But then my horizons kept sort of expanding, right? I started to understand, wait, there's more to it than just what's happening in the general session room here. There's the experience around food and beverage. There's the experiences around meetings or evening events and all of those sorts of things. And so, yeah, that sort of production business eventually grew and through a lot of great relationships that I made within the industry. So again, those connections really guided me. My business partner, Dave Wagner, meeting him as a hotelier, and he really brought sort of that hospitality side, right? That understanding of hospitality in the hotel business. And I brought that production side. And so those connections continue to help the business evolve all the way through to, some of our latest folks like yourself, really being able to come in and help us with, communications and marketing and really how do we properly, communicate to these folks who are here? What is it that we want them to experience and see and do, I think, as they leave. So,
yeah. And, you talk about all those different pieces of the events. I mean, it's really, even if you're hosting just a meeting, there's so much that goes into it. It's not just get a room and talk, right? There's a lot of different elements to it. And I think as a lot of companies are coming back to hosting events again and really scaling that up and seeing the benefits of doing that, a lot of them are facing problems in terms of, even just inflation from 2019 to 2023. Things are so different. And, getting people engaged and really making their events more than just what they used to be. So we're going to talk a little bit about why people are facing these problems, why their events are falling flat. So can you kind of help us define what that looks like? What does it mean for events to not be effective?
Right. I think events are in an interesting place. All businesses are, right? As we've come through the pandemic, a lot of businesses were forced to sort of figure out how to do more with less, right?
Exactly.
And so a lot of business functions had been commoditized, right? It became a commodity, right? How do we best ensure that we're getting the best deal on our equipment, on centralized services, whether it's legal, HR, those sorts of things? How do we centralize and become efficient in these things? And events kind of fell into that. And so events started to become, and they were even prior, but when they're viewed directly as a commodity, you sort of end up with this checklist, which is important. The strategic meetings management side of things is very important. The procurement, how are events sourced? How are they approved, budgeted, planned, that sort of thing. But when you boil it down to just that checklist, it can become very flat, right? We've got a hotel, we've got an AV room, we've got an evening event, and we've checked all those boxes, and that's all the event is. And people start to sort of experience that, like, we're just sort of being moved through this machine, right? Mm-hmm. And so events, while those things are important, that procurement model, that strategic meeting management program is important. What can't be lost on that is the overall experience that an attendee is going to have, right? Either they're being asked to come to these sorts of things, or they're able to leave. In some cases, if it's a partnership or user group meeting, they're actually stepping away from their business, right? So they need to see a lot of value in that. There's an expense, both in their time and financially, for them to go attend these events. Or even in the case of like a sales meeting and that sort of thing. These are people that are stepping away from their homes, from their jobs, and are taking time to travel to a place to really ultimately connect with people, right? What is the difference between having a virtual or online meeting or just a phone call versus coming to that event? And just checking those boxes is not enough. We really need to step back and think about what is the actual attendee experience that's happening. And not to say that we need to spend more money to do that, right? It's just, it becomes more of a specific and purposeful, goal and objective that you have going into your meetings and events.
Yeah. And, I think when companies think about things more from like a we've always done it this way standpoint, that can kind of get them into trouble, especially right now when everything is so digital and events are kind of that way to really connect people. You don't necessarily want to make it we've always done it this way, right? So how do you approach that with our clients who come to us and say, we want to do this, but we've done it this way? What would you recommend?
Right. The first thing that we really do try and do is sort of take a step back and understand their perspective, sort of where they're coming from. Again, it's easy to fall into that trap of, hey, we've got a 3-day meeting. It consists of these parameters. Let's just go, fulfill that order, which is fine. We do want to, of course, approach our clients and say, yes, we're capable of fulfilling that order for you. However, if you help us, I'll take a step back and sort of understand what are the big picture goals and objectives of the business. Who are the stakeholders that are involved in this event? What is it that they're looking to accomplish? Is it, new leadership? Is there a change in direction for the company? Have they faced layoffs? What are the challenges that these businesses face, and what are the things that we want to motivate and inspire people to do through attending this event? And those can be sort of very big picture. They can be very broad. They don't have to be very, very specific. We want to then come in and help sort of brainstorm and ideate around how do we take those big picture sort of goals and objectives and turn them into actionable items around your event. So an example may be, a customer that's going through a lot of M&A, right? They're doing their growth through acquisition. And so their goal is to sort of continue to grow in that way, but at the same time, realize that as they're acquiring these additional businesses, there are different cultures, there are different ways of doing things, that sort of thing. So how do we bring those folks in, not only to just another sales meeting and give them, hey, now you're a part of this larger organization and here are the things that we do, but how do you bring them more into the culture? Not only here are the things we do, but here's why we do the things we do. And here's what this means for you in the future if you are able to come in and continue to work with us and now be a part of this large organization.
The attendees are having the best experience possible, right?
Right. That's actually a great point that you bring up that I'd like to comment on as well. It's the person that's running the event is seen, like it or not, as the host. And just like when you host a party in your home or, for friends, if the host is frantic, if the host, the host sets the tone, right? And that's what we also want these folks, whether they're professional meeting planners or executive admins or marketing communications people or HR people, doesn't matter. If you're the host, everybody, including your executive, first your stakeholders are going to look to you to sort of set the tone, but certainly the attendees. And so if your hair on fire, don't have a second to welcome or say hello for good reason, because you have a million things to check on and do, that stress level goes through to everyone. Whereas if you're relaxed, calm, feeling good, then that same thing. Now your speakers feel better about what they've got going on. Your executives are comfortable. Everybody's not on edge. And so that's also a very important reason to make sure that you have a really great support structure.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things that our clients that we've been chatting with them a little bit about, which I find really interesting from a marketing perspective, because I think a lot about content and about, the things that you actually want to talk about at events, right? And we've been chatting with a few clients about theming and content structure and things like that. And I think a lot of companies, when they create their events, they don't necessarily take a step back and think about how all those different things connect, how they connect to your overall business goals, your marketing messages, things like that. So I'd love to dig into that a little bit. What are some of the recommendations you have for clients around structuring their content and how they approach creating a theme for their event and things like that? And, on the vein of why events are falling flat, maybe talk a little bit about the downside of some of the themes that people choose and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's very important for me, especially. And I think throughout my career, I've seen sort of the power of branding, right? The power of not only branding, but of analogy, of theme, right? If I'm sort of speaking to my team and trying to motivate them to take a particular action or behave in a certain way, if I can connect with them on a personal level on something that they understand, whether it's a sports analogy or mountain climbing or exploring or those sorts of things. That's so often why we see those types of keynote speakers, former NFL coaches or players or, famous explorers or adventurers. That helps drive those people, right? That everybody sort of is looking for, that behavior that will help them be successful, that example, right? That will help them be successful. And so by theming, by branding your event, you can sort of have a shorthand for that, right? You can really help people start to understand, oh, this is why we're here. This is what's being communicated, especially when they leave. There's so much content, so much information that they're going to be receiving. You want them to be able to sort of draw back to that anchor, to that idea, that theme, that, oh yeah, this is what they meant about, how I'm supposed to follow up with my sales contacts or these sorts of things. I'm like that NASCAR, team manager that, we draw those analogies to the things that I need to do every morning to prepare myself to be ready to go and be as successful as I can. Here are that's that analogy. And so often, yeah, we do see that, right? It's the sales kickoff, or it's the incentive trip, or that sort of thing, again, because it's just sort of always been that. And companies are missing opportunities to, again, sort of take a step back and help people better sort of define, why are we doing this? It's a sales kickoff. Well, that means we're launching, into the next year, right? We're giving you the information that you need to be successful and sort of understand where the business is going in the next year. And so how do we build a theme around that? How do we build a memorable message around that? Launch is a great word right there. Instead of calling it sales kickoff 2023, maybe it's launch 23, launch 24. And we look at the different themes and imagery and messaging that we can use to support that theme. And that, so everything that we do, when we start to think about what is the content in the general session, or even earlier than that, what does the registration website look like? There's a perfect way for them. The invite, the initial save the date. Here's a way to sort of announce that and get people excited, create some buzz around the event. What does the registration website look like? What is the arrival experience? What obviously the general session content. Everybody thinks about that with theme, but they sort of forget that creativity doesn't just happen in that main session. Even things like food and beverage, evening events, decor, all of those things, right? There's a lot that can be said. So often we see folks that sort of take that first step toward that theme, but then tend to forget about it. They'll do sort of one theme for the general session because it's fun and cool, maybe funny. It's relevant to maybe a personality within the executive team, that sort of thing. And then they'll just go a completely different direction with the evening event that night. And that sort of then becomes confusing. People are like, well, we had a particular theme here, and then we completely departed from that for what we did in the afternoon or the evening. And so, much like obviously brand continuity, we very much want to help folks build that style guide, right? That brand guide around their events. One of the most powerful tools that we've been utilizing lately is the creative brief for clients. So as we come in and help develop that theme, we then create sort of this executive summary, this one-page creative brief that explains what the theme is, what the brand is, what the look and feel of the event is, and then also helps to draw those analogies. Hey, we're going to be drawing analogies around sport or NASCAR, exploring, that sort of thing. And that's distributed to all of the speakers. And so as they're starting to think about their content and the things that they'll be talking about, they also understand that sort of overarching theme and can develop toward that. It doesn't have to be dead on, doesn't have to be exact, but any small reference or tie-in that can be made is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you mentioned at the beginning the power of branding, and often I think it's kind of a last minute ad, right? And I might be biased because obviously I'm a marketer, but
right.
I think it should be an integral part of the entire planning process, and should really always tie back to what your business goals are and what are your goals for the year. That should be tied into your kickoff and into your kickoff theme, and really help close. I think of the neural pathways, right? But close those gaps of understanding for the people who are attending your event. If they're internal employees, help them close those gaps throughout the year too, and really get everybody focused on that idea and that goal, and what message you're trying to convey. Because I think the events that do that, those are the ones that really stick with people and that get people coming back year. But what's going to be next year, right? What am I going to learn next year? So I think, that's been something that's been fun to kind of explore with some of our clients and get them kind of thinking through that a little bit more holistically. So kind of looking at, events holistically, why some people are facing, events that are not performing as well as they might have in the past. What would be your 3 top tips? I'm going to throw that one at you.
3 top tips. All right. To keep your events effective as possible. I think tip number 1 is define goals and objectives, right? Really work with stakeholders to really understand what is it that we're trying to accomplish. And that can just be 1 or 2 things, right? We're trying to build culture. We're trying to increase sales. We're trying to, get more customer feedback. We're trying to retain top performers, right? What is that sort of top level goal? At least have that. And then let's make sure everything that we're doing there is supporting that. I think another top tip is to, budgets are tight, of course, right? There has to be ROI. So really come away, I think, first with an understanding of what goals and objectives are. Secondly, what is our sort of spend category? What do we have to work with here? And then design around that. So often it's difficult for folks that say, hey, we have this event for this many people over these days, and it's this budget, right? You can't sort of choose all of those things at once. So you can choose budget and date range, but then maybe location needs to be flexible, or you can choose date range and location, but then budget needs to be flexible, right? It's kind of that fast, easy, cheap.
Yep.
Pick 2. It's that. So I think number 2 is going into it sort of with a clear understanding of what your budget is. And then number 3, I think, is really evaluating resources, evaluating both your internal resources as well as then what are your opportunities to outsource and create some efficiencies here. Who are the teams that we can put around us? Who are the individuals that we have internally that can help with some of these folks, as well as then, where are the efficiencies, the buying power, the efficiencies in process, best practices, those sorts of things that we can seek to outsource and work with other individuals on.
Awesome. Yeah, I think those are all three great things that companies can get started with right away, right? They can start looking at their program and evaluating where they may need to bring in more resources, bring in more budget, et cetera. Thank you, Brian, for your time.
Thank
this
you, Katie.
was awesome. I hope that everybody watching found this valuable and might be able to take a look at their events and see where they might be able to improve a little bit too. We'll be back with you soon with more awesome content.
Bye, everybody.